The thing I keep coming back to isn't the night I found out. It's all the ordinary evenings before it, when I'd been so relaxed, so comfortable, sitting in my own living room with the curtains open like it was nothing. I think about that more than anything. How calm I was. How long I was calm for. I rented the bottom half of a converted house on a quiet street. The kind of place where you know your neighbors by their cars more than their faces. I'd been there about a year and a half, single, mid-30s, working a job that had me coming home tired most nights. Which matters, I think, because being tired makes you stop noticing things. Or maybe it makes you notice them and decide they aren't worth the energy. I'm still not sure which one it was for me. It started with the heating. Or, no, that's not right. Looking back, it started before the heating. But the heating was the first thing I actually paid attention to. So let me start there. I keep my flat cold at night. I sleep better that way, always have, and I'm careful about money. So the heating goes off at 10 and doesn't come back on until I turn it on in the morning. That was a fixed thing, a routine, and one morning in, I want to say November, I came out into the hallway and it was warm, properly warm. The kind of warm that takes a while to build up. I stood there in the hall for a second, and I remember thinking, I must have forgotten to switch it off. People forget things. I'd had a long week, so I checked the thermostat, and it was off. Set to off, which meant either it had come on by itself and then turned itself off again at some point in the night, or it had been on for hours, and I'd somehow slept through getting that warm. I went and put my hand on the radiators. They were cooling, but they'd been hot. Recently hot. I told myself the thermostat was faulty. That's a normal thing for a thermostat to be. I made coffee, and I went to work, and I genuinely didn't think about it again for maybe 2 weeks. The second thing was the back door. I have a habit, most people who live alone do, of checking the locks before bed. Front door, back door. The little window in the bathroom that doesn't close all the way. It's not anxiety, it's just a thing I do. The same way I always put my keys in the same bowl. And one night I went to check the back door, and the deadbolt was already thrown, already locked, which would be fine, completely fine, except I don't lock the deadbolt. I use the handle lock. The deadbolt sticks, and it's awkward, and I'd basically never touched it the whole time I lived there. I stood at that back door for a long time. I want to be honest about what I was thinking, because it wasn't fear. It was more like irritation, confusion, the feeling you get when you can't find your phone and you absolutely know that you put it on the table. That low hum of wrongness when the world doesn't match your memory of it. I unlocked the deadbolt and I locked it again myself, just to feel it, just to confirm I knew how it worked. And I went to bed, and I slept fine. I didn't tell anyone about either of these things, by the way. There was nothing to tell. My heating came on and my door was locked is not a story. It's barely even a sentence. Here's where it gets harder to explain in order, because the next few weeks are where the small things started overlapping and I stopped being able to file each one away neatly. The milk. I drink oat milk in my coffee and I buy 1 carton a week. And that's plenty. I never run out. And I started running out. Not dramatically. I'd go to make coffee on a Thursday and the carton would be lighter than it should be. Or empty, 2 or 3 days early. I assumed I was using more than I thought. People are bad at estimating that stuff. Then a phone charger. I keep one by the bed and one in the kitchen. And the kitchen one went missing for about 4 days and then it was back. Plugged into the exact socket I use, which is not where I'd left it, because I'd left it on the counter. I remember thinking, when I found it, that I must have plugged it in and forgotten. That's the phrase I kept using in my own head for all of it. I must have forgotten. You can explain almost anything with, I must have forgotten, if you're committed to staying comfortable. The night everything changed was a Tuesday. And it changed because of something completely stupid. A smell. I came home late, later than usual, and the flat smelled like food, like someone had cooked. Not my food. I hadn't cooked in days. I'd been living on whatever I grabbed on the way home. It was a warm, oniony, cooked dinner smell, the smell of a kitchen that has recently been used, and it was in my kitchen, in my empty flat, where I had not cooked anything. And this is the part I have trouble with, because even then, even standing in my kitchen smelling someone else's dinner, my first instinct was to explain it. The neighbors, it must be drifting in from the flat upstairs. Old houses, the smells travel. That's what I told myself, and I half believed it. And I opened a window, and I made my tea, and I sat down. But I couldn't settle. Something underneath the rational part of me had finally started paying attention, and it wouldn't let me sit. So I did something I'd never done before in that flat. I went through it, properly. Every room, opening every door, like I was looking for something, except I didn't know what. In the spare room, which I didn't really use, it had a bed and some boxes, and that was it. The wardrobe door was open, just slightly, maybe an inch, and inside, on the floor of the wardrobe, behind the boxes I stored in there was a blanket, folded, not one of mine, a pillow that wasn't mine, a phone charger, the kitchen one, the one that had gone missing, and a couple of empty oat milk cartons, flattened, stacked neatly in the corner. I want to describe what I felt, but I'm not sure I felt anything at first. It was too big and too quiet. It was like my brain refused to assemble the pieces into the obvious shape, because the obvious shape was unbearable. Someone had been living in my flat, in the room I never used, coming out when I was at work or asleep, using my charger, drinking my milk, cooking when I was gone, turning the heating on because they got cold at night, and turning it off before I woke up, locking the back door because I still don't know why. Maybe they came in that way, and locking it felt safer to them, safer for them in my home. I left. I didn't take anything. I just walked out the front door and stood on the street and called a friend, and then the police, in that order, and I never spent another night there. They never found out who it was. There were signs the spare room window, the one that opened onto the side passage, had been worked loose. The official theory was that someone had been getting in and out that way, probably for weeks, maybe longer than weeks, and that I'd very likely been in the flat, asleep, at the same time as them more than once. But that's not the part that stays with me. The part that stays with me is the smell of cooking. Because to cook a meal in someone's kitchen, you have to feel comfortable there. You have to feel safe. And the whole time I thought I was alone in my own home, feeling safe. Someone else was feeling safe there too. We were both relaxed. We were both at home. I just didn't know I had company. I check inside wardrobes now, in every place I've lived since. I tell people it's a habit. I don't tell them where the habit came from. The second one was told to me by a woman I'll call Dana, and I'm going to try to tell it the way she told it, because the way she told it mattered. She wasn't dramatic about it. She was almost annoyed, like the whole thing had inconvenienced her, which I've come to understand is its own kind of trauma response. Some people get scared. Dana got organized. She worked nights at a distribution warehouse, the kind that runs around the clock, and she'd done it for years. She liked nights. Fewer people, less management hovering, and she could sleep in the day and have her evenings, sort of, to herself. The point is, she was used to the rhythm of it, used to driving home at 4 in the morning on empty roads, used to a world that ran in reverse from everyone else's. Her thing started with her car. She parked in the same spot every night at work, an outdoor lot, well lit, cameras, the whole thing. And she started noticing her car wasn't quite how she left it. The driver's seat, mostly. She's particular about her seat position. She's short. She has it pulled well forward. And a few times she got in and it felt off. Not dramatically moved, just a notch back maybe. The kind of thing where you think, Did I bump it getting out? Did someone lean on it? She mentioned it to a co-worker who laughed and said she was probably imagining it, and Dana, being the kind of person she is, decided to settle it. She took a strip of tape and marked the seat rail, marked exactly where it sat. A little experiment. She told me she felt slightly stupid doing it. 3 nights later, the seat was behind the tape mark, clearly behind it, and she sat there, in the parking lot at 4 in the morning, looking at this strip of tape and the gap behind it, and the annoyance she'd been carrying turned into something colder. Because someone had been in her car. Nothing was taken. Her car was old, there was nothing in it worth taking, and that was almost worse. People break into cars for a reason. Phones, change, the stereo. Someone had been getting into her locked car, and it was locked, she was sure it was locked, she always locked it, and not taking anything. Just sitting in it, adjusting the seat to fit themselves. Sitting in her car, in the dark of the warehouse parking lot, comfortable, and then leaving without a trace, except the seat they'd forgotten to put back. She went to security. The cameras, it turned out, covered the entrance to the lot and the building doors, but not the far rows where the night staff parked, because the night staff parking had been added later and nobody had ever extended the camera coverage, so there was nothing, just Dana and her strip of tape. She started parking closer to the cameras, and for a couple of weeks, nothing. The seat stayed put. She started to relax, started to think maybe it had been a one-off, some bored person who'd moved on. Then she found the other thing, and this is where Dana, telling me the story, stopped being annoyed. She kept a spare key. A lot of people who work nights and live alone do this. She kept a spare house key in her car, in the center console, in case she ever locked herself out, which she'd done once and never wanted to do again. And one morning, doing a clean of the car because the seat thing had made her paranoid, she opened the console and the spare key was sitting on top of the other junk in there, on top, when she always kept it underneath, in a little zip pouch, at the bottom. Someone in her car had found her spare house key, had taken it out, had it in their hand, and then put it back, but put it back on top, in a hurry, or carelessly, or maybe deliberately. She didn't know. The question that kept her up, she said, wasn't whether they'd used it, it was whether they'd copied it. You can't tell if a key's been copied. There's no mark, no sign. A key looks exactly the same whether it's been pressed into a blank 100 times or never. So Dana sat with this key in her hand and understood that there was no way to know whether a stranger had a copy of the key to her front door. The key to the house she slept in alone during the day, with the curtains drawn, dead to the world. She didn't gamble on it. She had every lock in her house changed that same day, paid the emergency rate, didn't even haggle. And then she did something she said she felt ridiculous about, but couldn't stop herself from doing. She went through her house looking for signs, the way I'd gone through my flat, looking for evidence of someone who shouldn't be there. She didn't find a person. She didn't find a blanket in a wardrobe. What she found was smaller, and in some ways worse. In her bathroom, the cabinet over the sink, her things were rearranged. Slightly, her toothbrush on the wrong side, a drawer in her bedroom not quite closed, when she's a closer of drawers. Tiny domestic wrongnesses, the kind you'd never notice unless you were already looking, the kind you could spend the rest of your life telling yourself you'd imagined. She'd changed the locks. That part was solved, or solvable. What couldn't be solved was the timeline, because if someone had a copy of her key and she would never know for sure whether they did, then the seat in the car was not the beginning. The car was just where she happened to catch them. The car was the one place they got sloppy. Everything before that, all those weeks of her sleeping soundly through the days, were now a question she could never close. She moved a few months later. She told me she doesn't keep a spare key in her car anymore, obviously, but also that she doesn't keep one anywhere a stranger could ever find, and that she changes the locks on every place she moves into the day she gets the keys, before she's even slept there once. "You can't trust the key the landlord gives you," she said. "You don't know who had it before. You don't know how many copies are out there." I'd never thought about that before she said it, about how many copies of my keys might exist in the world, about all the hands a key passes through before it gets to yours. I think about it now, every time I'm handed a set of keys to anything. The last one is mine again, and it's the shortest, and it's the one I almost didn't include because for a long time I genuinely couldn't decide if it counted. There's no break-in, no stranger, nothing was ever stolen or moved. By every measurable standard, nothing happened. And that's exactly why it's the one that still, years later, makes me check a certain thing before I go to sleep. After everything with the flat, I moved into a newer building. Secure entry, fob access, the works. I'd learned my lesson, or I thought I had. I'd learned to think about doors and windows and locks. What I hadn't learned to think about was the part of my home I couldn't see. This place had one of those video doorbells. The previous tenant had installed it and left it, and I'd connected it to my phone because, why not? It was convenient. I could see who was at the door before I answered. I liked it. It made me feel secure, which after the flat was something I wanted to feel very badly. The way it worked was it recorded a short clip whenever it detected motion, and saved them to a little timeline you could scroll through. Mostly it caught nothing. Delivery drivers, a cat that lived on the floor, me, coming and going. I almost never looked at the timeline. The motion alerts came to my phone, and if it wasn't someone at my actual door, I'd swipe them away without watching. One evening I was bored, scrolling through my phone on the sofa, and for no reason I can explain, I opened the doorbell app and started scrolling back through the saved clips. Just idle, just looking at nothing. Me leaving for work, a package, the cat, me coming home, and then a clip from a few nights before at around 2 in the morning. That was just my empty hallway. The motion sensor had triggered with nobody there. That happens sometimes. A moth, headlights through a window, the camera's not perfect. But I watched it because I was bored, and at the very edge of the frame, for maybe 2 seconds before the clip ended, there was a shadow, long, cast across the floor of the hallway from somewhere just out of view, the shape of a person standing still, just past where the camera could see, where the doorbell's vision dropped off right outside my door. Standing, not walking past. The shadow didn't move across the frame the way a person walking would. It was there, still, and then the clip cut off. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, the angle of a street lamp, a coat on a hook, anything. And I would have left it there, I think. I must have imagined it do its work one more time, except that something made me keep scrolling back, further, earlier nights. And it was there again, a different night, same time, roughly, 2:30 in the morning. The motion trigger, the empty hallway, and at the edge of the frame, that same still shadow, cast from just outside the camera's view. Someone standing outside my door in the middle of the night. Long enough to trigger the motion, long enough to leave a shadow, and then gone, every time, before the 30-second clip could catch them moving into view. I went back as far as the app would let me. Weeks. It wasn't every night, but it was often. A pattern of nights where, while I was asleep on the other side of the door, someone stood in my hallway, in the dark, just out of frame, doing nothing that I could ever see. Not knocking, not trying the handle, as far as I could tell, though the camera couldn't see the handle. Just standing, and then leaving. I never found out who it was. I changed buildings, of course. I reported it, but there was nothing to report, really. No crime, no entry, just a shadow at the edge of a camera that a polite officer agreed did look like it could be a person, but could also be a number of other things. I know what it was. I knew it standing in my own living room, with the phone shaking a little in my hand, scrolling back through night after night of it. Here's the thing that I can't put down, though. I only saw the shadow because the doorbell happened to be there, because the previous tenant happened to install it, because I happened to connect it, because I happened to be bored one specific evening and happened to scroll back. Take away any one of those accidents and I never know. I sleep through all of it, every night, comfortable and secure, in my new building, with my fob and my secure entry, and someone stands outside my door at 2 in the morning, and I never, ever know. So that's the thing I think about now, the thing that's worse than the flat, worse than the wardrobe. It's not what the camera caught. It's everywhere there isn't a camera. It's all the doors I've slept behind in my life, with no little app to scroll through, no accidental record, no bored evening on the sofa. I felt safe in all of them. I felt safe in the flat for a year and a half. Feeling safe, I've learned, tells you absolutely nothing about whether you are. I don't have a doorbell camera anymore. I thought about getting one for the new place, and I decided I didn't want it. Some part of me would rather not know. Some part of me has already seen enough of what's standing in the hallway after I've gone to bed, just out of frame, in every place I've ever lived and felt at home. You should sleep well tonight. You probably will. That's rather the point.